Hello and welcome to Spirit of Nature Art and another video tutorial, this time all about monoprinting using a jelly press. I've had lots of requests from people asking me to do this video and so I thought the best way for me to show you how I use my jelly press is just to video one of my play around sessions. So you can see my equipment here is pretty simple. I just have a jelly plate, I have some brayers and I have some acrylic paint. And I like to use lots of layers and stencils on my jelly printing. So you'll see here what I'm doing on this layer is I'm actually taking off a lot of the paint that I've just brayered on there. The more I brayer it, the more it picks up onto the brayer. I'm then cleaning it off on some scrap old book pages behind. So you can see there, you can actually, there we go, you can really see me taking some of that paint away. What I'm wanting to do here is just to have some of that paint around the edge to almost vignette my piece of artwork here. So we can use our brayers not just to put paint on, but to take paint off as well. And I'm leaving this clip in here because what I want you to see here is me actively leaving this jelly plate to dry, because I want to create layers here. I want each layer to have something different. So whilst I'm waiting for that to dry, that's why I've got the other little mini jelly plate on the side, so that I don't get bored whilst I'm waiting for the big one to dry. And I'm doing exactly the same on that little one. I've brayered on some paint and now I'm using that little brayer to remove some of the stuff from the middle, so we've got that vignetting effect around the outside there. You can see that now I've put that on. And now that first layer is dry on the big plate, I'm going in with a slightly lighter colour, brayering that all the way over, still quite a light layer, and then I'm placing my stencil over the top. And now I'm just getting a bit of scrap paper and I'm just rubbing that over the top, giving it a good massage, getting into all those little gaps in the stencil so that I can pull up all of the paint that stencil isn't masking. Now this piece of paper here that I've got is not the gel print, the monoprint that I'm wanting to create. This is a side effect. So that's going to make some great collage paper. So I'm putting that to the side. And then I'm going to remove the stencil, and you can already see some of that yummy texture that stencil now has left behind, where that stencil has acted as a resist when I put that paper on it. Now quite often you can get another print from that stencil, because you can see on that stencil there's lots of paint on it. It was quite dry by the time I lifted it off though, so I'm just using a baby wipe and rubbing it onto a piece of tissue paper, and you'll see when I lift that up, bingo, I have another nice piece of collage paper. Sometimes you can just spritz it with some water as well. It's another way to be able to get a secondary print of your actual stencil that you're using. Maximizing, I love that about a jelly print session, is that you can get so many different pieces of paper just from one print. So I'm doing the same on this little gel plate here, so that is now dry. I'm going in with a slightly lighter colour, brayering that out, popping my stencil on, bit of a swirly one this time, and then piece of paper, rubbing that around so that I can get rid of the excess paint in the gaps of that stencil. And actually that comes out pretty cool, I like that. Removing that stencil, again you can already see what's going on that gel plate there. I wouldn't be quite normally so vigorous at cleaning my stencils, but it's because I'm waiting for things to dry. So it's that one opportunity to do that. So I'm playing around with different stencils here on this big one. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do yet. So I'm just auditioning a few things, and it looks like that's going to be the one. And now I'm going in, if you notice, it's with a lighter colour again. So I started off with a darker colour, then the mid-range colour, and now the much lighter colour. And you can see how light a layer of paint I'm putting on, not thick, nice light layer. I want to just about see the layer beneath it. And then I'm putting that stencil on, I'm putting down my piece of tissue paper, I'm rubbing in between those gaps, and accidentally that tissue paper went onto the rest of the jelly plate and pulled up some of that print, which is a bit of a shame, but never mind. That actually ends up looking nice and grungy when I do the final print. So that Next layer there now, that mandala pattern in that paler blue as well. And that's one of the, mono printing is fantastic, and working with gel plates is great because they're very unpredictable. You can never be entirely sure what's going to come from them. There are some basic rules to help you to be able to put things in the kind of right order and to have a bit of a kind of good guess about what you're going to get. So essentially the first thing you put down on that plate is going to be the first thing you see. It's going to be the top layer on your piece of paper. So how good does that look? I'm really pleased with that. So that you can really see that vignette on there. That's the first layer. That darker colour around the edge is the first layer. Middle layer is that lovely turquoise swirl, and then the last layer becomes the background, that much paler colour. So always thinking about that when you're thinking about your layers. The first thing you do is going to be the first thing you see on your piece of paper, even though it looks like you're covering that up as you go forward with your gel plate. You're kind of doing it back to front, if that makes sense. So do the same again on this little one here. Just always, that's why I like to have 2 gel plates on the go. Whilst one is drying, I can work on the other one. Exactly the same technique. Nothing different here, just using different stencils. Still working with the same paint colour because I put too much out to start with, so I just want to use that up. Now this big one is dry. I'm going in, just dabbing any areas there where there might be a bit of excess paint, but I'm going in with is that white? Yep, I'm going in with a white colour here, and again a really thin layer. You can just start to see the pattern coming through there, putting on my piece of paper, and this is the print I want. So this is the one I've been working towards. Everything else up until this point has just been a nice added extra. So giving this a good rub, because it's that last coat of white paint that's going to lift everything up. All those layers underneath that I allowed to dry, this top layer is going to pull all of that up with it. Oh, I am giving this some extra attention. Now I think I do actually leave some of the, I do actually have a bit of an issue with this one. It's not the end of the world. But you can see here where that mandala is. You can see where I accidentally took off some of that printing with the tissue paper. But you know what? I love the grungy look of it. And you may have noticed when I first put my gel plates out, they still had lots of muck on them from the last printing session. I don't clean my gel plates unless there's some paper stuck on it like there was there, because all of that gunky, grungy stuff that's left from the last time, that's what gets pulled up on the next print. So often you find there's a little bit of pattern in the background left from another time, or even a bit of colour. On that last one I just pulled, there was a bit of kind of rusty brown colour that was from the previous setting, and that really added to the print. So I like that aspect of it. So you'll see a lot of people when you watch videos on YouTube that will say they never clean their Gelli plate, and that's why you get that much grungier look with it. This little one here is really cute. I love this. So that real tone on tone look with that lovely flourish stencil from Tim Holtz. Going in now with a different colour, going now to my purples. And again, put out way too much. I'm not using any kind of special paints here. I'm just using bog standard acrylic paints from, the craft shop. Nothing special. And it's just about playing around and getting used to your paints and how they react, because each paint, even within the same range, they're a bit different. So there are some paints that I find really work well with this and others don't, even though they're from the same range. So you just have to kind of play around a little bit. And it does depend on the techniques that you want to do, because I'm doing quite fine detail here. Look at that. There's a lot of fine detail there. So I kind of don't want the paint to be too liquid, because it will seep underneath that stencil. So these acrylics are actually quite thick, and they work quite well for me with this technique. can see at the side what I've done here. I had some paint left on my brayer, so I put a bit of tissue paper over the top of a stencil and rubbed the brayer over it. So it's a bit like a brass rubbing. So you get another kind of type of print. So at the end of a jelly plate play around, I tend to have loads and loads of paper. Honestly, it's all over the floor. I end up throwing it around everywhere, so much of it. And I like working with tissue paper because when I'm doing this type of technique, I'm trying to get into all those little gaps in the stencil and get rid of as much of that excess paint as I can. And tissue paper really allows you to do that. But also tissue paper works fantastic for collage. So I can stick that using some matte medium over the top of an art journal page or over the top of some collage, and it's really lovely to use like that. Going in with my next layer here, so this really is a very thick, juicy magenta, this paint here. I'm just doing the same as I did with that previous one with the mandala, only I'm going to be a little bit more careful this time with my tissue paper and taking up that excess paint from between the holes in the stencil. There we go. So I didn't let the paper dip down that time. But I am going back and dabbing gently just a little bit, just to lighten certain areas. You can see now that pattern beneath is coming out. Look, there's me doing another one of those kind of like brass rubbing style things with the leftover paint on my brayer and just a piece of tissue paper that's at the side there. So some fab bits of collage paper. In fact, I think I did use that on one of my art journal pages as a background layer. Now just letting everything dry, and that's what's really important. You need to let each layer dry so that that one then doesn't get into it, because if I go in now and that's wet and I put another layer on, it's all going to merge together and that lovely pattern's going to disappear. So that's why you need to leave each layer to dry in between. So yeah, have something else to do at the side. And to be honest with you, if you start working with Gelli press, you're going to get a bit addicted. I actually have 3 Gelli press plates, so quite often I'm working 3 at a time. Just gives me that opportunity to get maximum fun from the session and keep myself busy whilst everything's drying. This one's lovely. There we go. So simple to do, just 2 layers, 1 stencil. And it's, what I love about it is it's instantly dry. So as soon as you pull it off the plate, it's instantly dry. So you can start working with it straight away. There we go, this is a 1 layer. So 1 layer here of paint, pop that stencil on the top. Take off the excess, a bit of tissue paper. 1 piece of collage paper. And we'll leave that to dry and go back and we'll put 1 more layer on and pull that off, and that'll be lovely. So this big one is dry now. So now it's time to pull that print off. So I'm putting in the really pale colour now. So rather than a white, I'm going in with a buff. Just, I don't know, felt it complemented those colours a bit better. So putting on that really thin layer of that buff paint straight on with, this is where you don't want that layer to dry, because you want that page to go on whilst that top layer is still wet, so that that's bonding to the page. And when it bonds to the page, it's then going to pull all of those lovely layers off with it. Here we go. Wonderful. I love that grungy look. This one's actually quite busy, probably needs, it's going to be a great background rather than an actual finished piece. But I love that really grungy look that you get from the Gelli plate. It's not perfect. And that's the other thing that's wonderful about it. It really gives you permission to play, because you don't quite know exactly what's going to happen. There is that element of not quite knowing. And that is that, I love that whole kind of like, well, what if I did this? I wonder if I put that on, I wonder how that would work out. And just play. It's my favourite thing to do when I don't know what to do. Just grab some stencils, grab some paints and just play with the Gelli press, and you always get something that's really interesting. Ooh, so I'm playing with some different, I'm getting some stamps here now. Putting on a couple of different colours here, brayering those together, getting that bit of a mix. And then I'm going in with these wooden stamps. These really kind of quite ethnic. They remind me of my kind of paisley skirts I wore when I was, you know, kind of 14 and all bohemian. I love that. I love that look. And these stamps work really well with the Gelli press. There's just enough give in the Gelli press to kind of let those stamps, look at my hands, to let those stamps really kind of shine. Those patterns come out beautifully. I will warn you, a Gelli plate session is pretty messy, not just on the hands, but on the whole room. So going back to this little mini one here, I've put a couple of different layers of stencils on here, going in with that final layer of white straight in with the paper before it dries, giving it a good rub around. A very good rub around before pulling that off, and there we go. Look at all that texture, lovely texture and colours. This is the last one that I do here. So I'm using those two colours, but I'm not wanting to mix them together too much. I want to be able to see those two different colours, and then I'm just picking a couple more of these lovely stamps here. There's kind of this one here, kind of top and tailing it, and then that beautiful paisley pattern in the middle. Now remembering to let that dry. Now that layer needs to dry, so I'm going to come back to this one. Just testing how dry that one is. Now I know it is. I'm going in with that last layer, using white on this one, taking enough of that paint off so I can just see the pattern peeking out from beneath it, giving it a good rub. Now, this is not the only way to use a Gelli plate. If you Google, it's YouTube, Gelli printing, you will, there are so many different ways to use it. This is just one of the ways I like to use it, and so I thought it's just interesting to see how people use their supplies and their products. So I thought this would just give you some ideas and some inspiration, and if you haven't used a Gelli plate before, oh my gosh, I would highly recommend it. So much fun. I'm not even sure what brand I've got. There's a few different brands out there. I don't think any one is particularly better than another. Look at that. That's so cute. I love that one. And they're not particularly expensive. So just have a play, have some fun. And you can see here, I've got some things here which are just going to be great collage fodder, or perhaps good background pages. That's like a finished piece, might make a nice bookmark. So lots of different things. That could be a background to a card with a focal image on the top. These lovely bits of tissue paper here, yeah, I often use these as backgrounds. I might stick that over a canvas board and use that as a background. Loads of different texture and colours in there, perhaps a little bit busy, but still fun as well. And I love these kind of extra kind of side effects, these bits here, just me, you know, getting rid of the excess on my brayer over the top of the stencils. Nothing goes to waste. Even those pages in that old book that I used to clean my brayer off, often I end up tearing out and stamping over, or using them as collage. These two are lovely here. I love these two. Again, they might make great bookmarks, or you know, yeah, actually on a front of a card with a focal image and a sentiment. Loads more. There we go, that one. You can see that lovely rust colour on there that I didn't put on there this time. That came through from the previous one. All of this just came from that one session, probably about an hour, sat down. All of this stuff came from that. So I love the Gelli press, you may well have noticed. So have a play around. I hope you've enjoyed how I use it, and I look forward to seeing how you use it.